Okay, we're back again, and first thing we're going to do is look at getting this slow down motion happening. Now, at the moment, everything stops at around frame 88, which gives us 12 frames that we have to play with. So I'm going to go ahead and give us an extra couple of frames to work with so that we have all this time here to be able to slow down our movement. So what I'm going to do is find out the best place of impact. I think it's going to be around there. I think that's where I'm going to start slowing down the animation. So I'm going to just, in the outliner, select all the boxes, and then with the keyframes here, I'm just going to drag across the time slider and then just move them towards the end like that. So we have this big gap here. As you'll notice, the computer automatically interpolates in between that motion, and we get that kind of cool slowed down effect. Okay, so we've got these slowed down frames here, but we want probably a little bit more movement than that. So I'm going to hold down Shift and highlight this keyframe here, and right click and delete. And so that's just given us a bit of extra movement. And so you get the nice rotation, particularly with this larger cube here. And so this is looking kind of nice. So we're going to go ahead and move on from this. What we want to do now is set up the camera. So I'm going to go ahead and save my work by hitting Control S, and I'm going to go to Create, Camera, Camera. And so I'm going to go to Panels, Perspective, and look through this camera 1, which I've just created. And as you notice, the camera comes in at the origin, and at the moment you can't see much at all. So I'm just going to move about the scene until I find an angle that I like. I'll turn on, we have the resolution gate at the top here, which we can turn on, which will show us what the camera aspect ratio will be rendering. So we'll find something nice. We'll maybe zoom back a little bit and then just play through the animation. So that's kind of the money shot that we want to see all the variation in. So we'll just try and frame that up. That's a nice view that we've got there. I think we'll start working with that. Now, with cameras, what you can do is hit S to create a key, and then if you scroll along, you can then move the camera elsewhere to create a new angle later on down the timeline, and then it'll interpolate between that for you. But this isn't really the effect that I'm looking for. So in films like The Matrix, they actually have a perfect circle of cameras that will make this lovely arc around the motion, which we're not really getting at the moment. We're just getting a linear motion from one point to the other, and the camera's moving in and then moving out from the action, and it's not very pretty. You could try and just adjust the camera through certain points, but then you start getting all this weird motion. So we're going to actually set up a camera rig to get something that is geometrically perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and delete out these keyframes. And what I'm going to do now is go into the Curves tab, create a NURBS curve, and just somewhere in the middle will be good. At the moment I can't actually create a curve because I'm not at a very good angle, so I'm going to go back to my perspective and drag in the middle until you've got a nice curve that you can see. I'm going to lift it up a little bit and put these back to 0 so that I know that I've got it in the origin. Then looking at the scene, the center of it isn't really in the origin. We want to have the center of our circle at the same sort of center that we have of these boxes. So I'm just going to pull that to around there, and that looks about where I want it to be. So what I can do after this is select my camera in the outliner and then shift select the curve and hit P to parent, and now I've got this curve that actually affects the camera. So if I press E to bring up my rotation tools, when I rotate this circle, it will actually rotate the camera. Now this is going to give us the lovely sort of arc motion that we want. So what I'm going to do now is actually place the keyframes on the curve. So I'm going to set a key at the start, and then I'm going to rotate it. We'll put in 60 degrees of movement, and that's automatically created another key. And so if we go back to our camera, we'll actually see that the camera is rotating in a nice arc around the rest of the boxes. Now at the moment we want the camera to actually change speed at the same time as the boxes. So what I'm going to do is just click on the boxes, and I'll notice here that at frame 22 and 51, between frames 22 and 51, we have the slowed down motion. So what I'll do is, that's probably the best camera angle that we have. So I'm going to set a keyframe here and go a couple of frames further along and set another one. And what I can do then is shift and click on these keyframes and then drag that back to frame 21. So it was frames 22 and 51, so I'll come back here. So at frame 22, and that's already at frame 51, brilliant. So we have the slowed down camera movement, but at the moment the interpolation that the computer's created isn't giving us the nicest effect. It's not continuous. So what we're going to do is bring up the graph editor by going to Window, Animation Editors, and then Graph Editor. And here we can see our camera movement in graph form. So I'm just going to hit F to frame up the camera move, and I'm going to isolate this rotation by clicking Y. Now you can see how there's this ease out, there's a bit of easing, interpolation here, and then a lot of easing over here. We don't want that for this. We want the really sharp sort of changes between when it's in standard motion and when it goes to slow motion. So I'm going to simply marquee select all of those, and I'm going to go here to the linear tangents and just make them all linear. Now what that'll do, I'll just minimize that, is create a very sharp difference in speed, which is the same sort of difference in speed that we already have on the boxes already. So we'll just play that through and see what it looks like. Okay, so that's starting to look nice, although I'm thinking that the camera is moving a little bit slow, particularly at the start. Just to really emphasize the slow motion part of it, we're going to actually make the camera move a little faster. So we'll go back to the graph editor, and what we can do is we can grab this key here, and pressing the W to bring up our transform tool, we can actually hold shift, middle mouse drag, and pull it down to create a steeper gradient here. And we're going to do the same with the one at the end, just so that we get more of a camera move. And I'll minimize that. Okay, so that's starting to get a little nicer as well, but we'll have it moving a little more during the actual slow motion part. So we'll come back here, select key, and shift drag it up so that we get a larger distance covered. We'll minimize that and play that again. And that's really starting to look like what we want. We have this nice slowed down motion part in the middle, and we've purposefully cut out this extra box in the corner that bounces around a little more than we'd like. So that's how you set up the camera. I'll be back with the next tutorial on how to set up the renders and getting this into a stage where we can output it into After Effects.